Like I said, this is our presentation and meeting tonight for our classic parents with opening information about our reopening here at Hanalei Elementary School. And again, I just want to thank you for being here as part of our community because this involves you and your students. And like I said, the staff here has been working hard to come up with a safe reopening plan. And I like to see our little logo there because it reminds me about this idea at Hanalei, we live the spirit of aloha. And I think that's true every day. And even though we are in this global pandemic, our staff takes seriously the relationships and the connections with our students. You know, that aloha stands for building academics with students, leadership, opportunity, honor and respect, and accountability. And again, even though we are in a difficult situation in a pandemic, we still hold those values to be true here at Hanalei. And our priority in all of this is to ensure that both our staff and your children, our students, can confidently return to school in a safe environment that's going to be conducive for learning. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So here's the three sort of main ideas that we'll go over. And that is, number one is the student agreements. That again is another document that was in the parent connection that was sent this weekend. Our classic teachers have been reviewing it with students and they will be doing that this week if they haven't yet. But it just talks about some of the things that the students can expect when they come back. We're also going to talk a little bit about health and safety, what kinds of health and safety procedures we have in place and what kinds of things you can do at home. And then our arrival and dismissal procedures, because if we all follow our arrival and dismissal procedures, we'll have a very smooth entrance and exit to school. That won't be any problems at all. So again, remember, as we go through, we'll kind of stop after each of these sections, the student agreements, the health and safety, the arrival and dismissal, to check for questions. And in the student agreements, there's 6 or 7 different topics that are in there about face masks, social distancing, hand washing and hygiene, what's going to happen in the classroom, our playground rules, what the lunch tables will look like, and then our before and after school procedures. So wanted to just let everybody know that the face mask, what our face mask policy is, and you can see that face masks will be required for all students, grades TK through 5th, that return for classic school. And they will be required to be worn at all times during the day, except for when they are eating or drinking. So during lunchtime, we have the kids a plan to have them spaced out at the lunch tables, and they can take off their masks during that time. Also, when you're thinking about masks for your kids and sending them with a mask to school, please do send them with a mask. That this is a policy that comes from our board, the school board of directors. The school board adopted this policy based on the CDC recommendations. And then part of the recommendations that our board has also adopted has to do with the idea of bandanas, gaiters, and masks with vents or valves that are not allowed. So you guys know what a bandana is. Those gaiters are those like pieces that kind of like a turtleneck goes all the way around the neck and then you pull it up. The CDC just recommends that those are actually too thin to be effective. And then the same thing with any of those masks that have the vents or valves on them, because those protect the person who's wearing them. But when you breathe out, they don't stop anything and everything just comes out the vents. So we want to make sure that we're not only protecting your student, but we're protecting the other students too. So just remember that the face masks will be worn all the time. We do have, just as sort of a little side note, because I know, talking to parents and staff members, there have been concerns, my kid's little, how is he going to be able to wear that all day? It's going to be very hard for them. We have on campus right now, we have 2 of our special education classes, our special day classes that are here. And those students have been doing a fabulous job wearing their masks, and it has not been a problem for them at all. So I think they've been a great model to show everybody else that it can be done and it's not really a problem. They wear them and just kind of forget about it and don't really realize it. So that is face masks. If for something happens in the day, say your kids loses their mask, they accidentally throw it away, it falls in the mud. Our teachers do have some disposable ones that they can use to them and some other cloth masks that they will provide to the kids, but we do ask that you do send them to school with a mask. Social distancing. So there's two things here that we're encouraging all of our families and our students to maintain the recommendation of a 6-foot distance from each other. When you're arriving and leaving school, when we're in the restrooms, when we're at the lunch tables, we'll have out in front of school dots out there to mark, especially if you happen to be, picking up your kid from the gate, to, please help us out by keeping your distance and observing all of those social distancing markers. Same thing for coming into the office. We have some lined up for the office, and we ask people to wait outside until there's an opening in the office, just one person up in the office. We're here to help you and support you, but we just want to do it at safe distances. So we've got those set up. And then the other thing I want to talk to you about, this is the way our health plan works. It works around this philosophy of a bubble. And you see, we call it their students will be working within their bubble. So we've done everything to isolate classrooms of students and keep them in their own bubble or separate from other groups of students so those bubbles don't mix. And the point there is that will reduce the number of contacts that these students could possibly have with somebody else. So just, imagine, or just kind of play a what if scenario. If somebody did get sick in another class, then your student in a separate class wouldn't have to do anything. We could go on as learning as normal because they never had contact or they never came across those students in that other class. Instead, we would just work with that class and think within that class, did that student have any close contact with somebody in that classroom? And so all of our schedules are built around that. So since we have about almost exactly half the number of students coming back for Classic and half the number of students staying home and virtual, we'll have about half the number of students on campus. So we have the same size campus, but with fewer students. So that on the playground, we can have, where it used to be 3 or 4 classes to the playground, we can just now with our schedule have 1 class on a playground at a time, and they get that whole playground to themselves. So there's actually a lot of benefits to that without, having other run-ins with other students or any of those other sort of behavior problems that come with that. They'll just have plenty to do, plenty of space to spread out and enjoy during recess. The same thing goes for lunch, and then the lunch tables, they'll sit at the lunch tables with their class. And we actually have noon duties, 1 noon duty assigned to every class. So that again is another benefit of this. In the past, we have a noon duty for Centum as a whole grade level. We're here now, we can have a noon duty that it will be taking the students to lunch, and then that same noon duty will take the kids out to the playground. And so then it'll give those noon duties an opportunity to really build relationships with your students, know them by name, and help them and meet all of their needs during those recess and lunch times. And then again, the idea is those bubbles don't cross or don't mix.
Mr. Corporal?
Yep.
I see that someone has their hand raised, and I just didn't want to keep going unless you'd like that question to go in the chat.
Yeah, please. I do see one hand. If you do have a question, go and type it in the chat. When we get done with this section right here, the student agreement section, we'll stop and kind of answer some of those questions. Thank you. So the other one is hand washing and hygiene. So we have created a hand washing schedule so that there are set times during the day where students will be washing their hands with soap and water and then drying them with paper towels. All of our classrooms have been outfitted with soap, and they have sinks in them, which is nice. But then they have paper towels also. We've also had installed 4 extra sinks throughout the classroom and throughout the campus to speed those kinds of things up and make it easier for our teachers to have the students wash their hands. And one of those things you can do at home is have your students practice doing that, vigorously rubbing their hands together, especially our younger ones, and getting them wet, putting the soap on them, rubbing them together. We also have, so there will be several times a day, two times as an example. One will be right before they go to lunch. So since as they're going to lunch, they're going to be using their hands and they're going to be eating and they're going to be taking off their masks. And then when they return from lunch, they'll be washing their hands again because they'll have, used their hands to eat and possibly touch their mouth, that kind of thing. All the other times we have all of the classrooms outfitted with plenty of hand sanitizer. So that'll be available to use at any other times, that during the day that they need to. when they're not washing their hands. And then teachers will also be just talking to the students about some of those good practices, like trying to avoid touching your face. All right. And then, so this idea of, just real quick, want to check a couple things. Okay. In the classroom, so I want to go back to this idea of what the classroom will look like. We talked about this bubble philosophy for our students. And so within that classroom, then we're going to do our best to keep those students safe and reduce the contact that they have with other students in the classroom. And this, again, is a balance because we want our students to feel welcome and to be happy and to be back at school, but then also to remind them of some of those, these extra safety precautions that we have. So with supplies, teachers have it set up where, rather than sharing a communal box of crayons, every student will have their own crayons. They all, teachers are creating their own little supply boxes for the students. They'll have their own scissors and pencils and crayons and things like that. And the teachers have already put those together and are providing that for them. Their devices, so that you all have devices checked out right now. Please bring those back with you on Tuesday. And those devices will continue to be checked out to the student, and they'll continue to use just that device so that they won't be sharing devices with other students. Our desks and furniture, so the desks in the classroom have been spread out as far as they can from one side of the room to the other so that there is space in between the desks. The teachers have removed as much extra furniture as they can from the classroom so that they can create that extra space. Now I'm sorry, real quick, hold on. Just need to close the door because one of our wonderful custodians is doing a fabulous job sanitizing the bathroom in the office right now, which they've been doing every day. So the goal and the recommendation from the CDC is to have the desks, as far apart as you can. 6 feet would be ideal, but they use the terms that they should be distanced as practicable. And the reality is that some of our classrooms, we cannot get the desks 6 feet apart because there's just too many desks. But on average, all of our desks are about 4 feet apart when you look from room to room. So there is space between all of the desks. We have taken them and they're all facing the same direction too. So what the CDC says is that if you can't get them 6 feet, if it looks a little less like ours 4 feet, then make sure all of the students are facing forwards so that they're not, face to face at any point on desks or tables that are facing each other. And we've got that set up that way. And then we also have things like cardboard dividers. They're little like corrals for the desks so that when the students are working and doing independent work, they could put up their little cardboard corral and work at their desk. And it's actually some of those things are things teachers use already, those cardboard corrals, like when students are testing, because it just kind of gives them their little space where they can work quietly and stay and have good concentration in them. Movement in the classroom, we're going to try to reduce the amount of movement that students have, and but in that students will stay in their seat as much as possible. That doesn't mean they will be sitting in their seat the whole time. And that's why some of these things, as you hear them, I just want you guys to kind of realize it's a continuum. We're not saying students will never get up out of their seats, because they will. If they need to go to use the restroom, they'll get up and go use the restroom. Teachers are going to be doing things like movement breaks where kids get up and stretch, but we're just going to try to minimize all of that. So that idea of modifications there is that we have modifications in the classroom, and it's going to operate differently than we did in a pre-COVID world, where we're not going to be doing small groups and centers for long periods of time, but teachers will still, meet with students individually. We've got plexiglass there for in between the teachers and the students to meet and to work. It's just going to be a little more limited than it was in the past. But again, it's that idea of where we're trying to find some balance here for the things that students need, but then also the safety that they need also. I'm going to go ahead. I was going to say, I'll go ahead and pause. Do we have questions in the chat that we can?
Yeah. We do. We have a couple of questions. Yeah. One is about backpacks, and then 2 of them were about just general supplies. What supplies will students be allowed to bring?
So they can still bring backpacks and they can bring them into the classroom. We'll have, teachers have their regular systems for students storing their backpacks. And then just some little modifications to that, rather like in the past, the kids get dismissed and they all maybe go to a backpack hanger all together. The teachers will dismiss them a few at a time to get their backpacks so that they're not close to each other. So they can get it. If you feel that they don't need a backpack, you don't have to send them with one. Supplies, and I think this goes for most of the teachers, and maybe if any of the teachers are on here want to speak up, there isn't anything really that we're requiring that they bring, but if they have things like their favorite kinds of pencils and pens or whatever it is, then they're certainly welcome, but we're not requiring them to bring any of the supplies. We'll provide it for them. Is that true for most of the teachers? Anybody any different from that? No? Yeah, okay.
It's true from what I've seen in the classrooms.
Yeah.
Definitely. We also have a couple of questions about the number of students per classroom.
Yeah.
And then in addition to the mask topic, face shields.
Okay. Awesome. So the numbers of students, I meant to get to that when I was talking before about the idea where half of our students are home and half are here. And so some of it seems confusing then. Well, then maybe should the classes be half the number of kids in them? And that's not the case. Our classes still have the same number of students as they always would. We're just trying to spread them out in the classroom like I talked about, with at least 4 feet of distance between the desks. So, we have anywhere from 24 to 26 in the lower grades. I think the maximum in our 4th and 5th grade is 29 students right now is our maximum in a class. And again, that's the idea, because we do have the same number of teachers that are teaching the same number of students. Some of those teachers just happen to be teaching the virtual only students. And then, so that's class. Oh, and then the other one is face masks. So students can wear face masks as long as they wear a cloth covering also. I'm sorry, a face shield. A face shield cannot take place of a face mask, is what I'm trying to say. But you're welcome to, they can wear both. And those are recommendations from the CDC and what our board has adopted, that a face shield, those plastic shields, don't do enough to protect the individual or the other people. The cloth face mask does. And we do have, we have provided those for our teachers. They can do the masks and the masks and the face shields also, if they want to. And then some of our specialty teachers, like our speech teachers, have some special masks that have little clear cutout plastic in them, so that they can see the students speaking, for instance. Any other questions at the moment?
Well, we have a couple about lunch and dismissal, but I think those are coming up, right?
Okay, yep, we'll get to that. And then if we don't hit it when we get to those sections, please let me know.
Okay.
Playground. So I mentioned this a little bit about that they're going to stay in their bubble, or which means their class, during recess and lunch. And that was one of the benefits, where each of our classes will get an entire playground to themselves. They also have their own PE equipment in their classes in these mesh bags. So everybody will have their own PE equipment, so they don't have to share. That PE equipment is actually sanitized at the end of the day. Our custodial staff have these electrostatic backpacks. It's basically a backpack with some disinfectant solution, and they come in and it sprays a mist over everything and disinfects it. It's a non-toxic disinfectant that the rooms are disinfected with every day. At this time, we're not going to use the play structures or the swings, just for a couple limited classes, because they have to be disinfected in between each class otherwise. And so at this time, we're just going to stick to just a couple classes using them. When we line up, the lines of classes, in order to keep them from their bubbles, will be separated from the other classes. And then in those lines, we're going to teach the students to try to keep some space between the people in front of them. They won't be able to do 6 feet in their line, because if you think of a class of 25 kids, that's 150 feet long is how long the line would have to be. So we're 6 feet apart, but they will, teachers are going to be teaching them to use their arms to keep distance between them and line up that way. And then, this is a good one right here too, for all of you to know. All of our drinking fountains have been turned off for hygiene reasons. And we have, some of them have been replaced with water bottle fill stations instead. In the classrooms, there are sinks with water bottle fill stations also where they can fill water bottles. I know some of our classrooms and teachers have already gotten their students water bottles and put their names on them. So if you're not sure, check with your teacher. But that may be something that you want to send your kid with, is a water bottle. And then you can write their name on it. And so, the teachers will have them take drinks before they go out to recess. They're only out at recess for 15 minutes. And so then they can come back in. And then our noon duties will be really good to monitor. If there are kids who, it's really hot and they need a drink, they will make accommodations for the students to get their water bottles and get a drink. All right, so that was lunch and recess. And then the other thing too, oh, sorry, that was just playground. We'll get to talk about the lunch right here. All students, yeah, go ahead.
There is a question about the recommended water bottle size or mouth that works best for the new hydration stations.
They actually can fill any water bottle. So I would do what's easy for your kid. I wouldn't send them with a big hydro flask like mine here. That's going to be too big. Just something smaller and more reasonable. I think would just be easier for the kids. One with my emoji on it. And yeah, before you worry about buying one, and double check with your teachers, and maybe we'll have them send something out to you, because I know some of the teachers, as a little kind of present for the kids, put together some nice water bottles for them.
Yes.
So breakfast and lunch, one of the nice things about Hanalei is that all students are eligible for free breakfast and lunch. And you do not have to do anything for that. You don't have to fill out an application. If there's a day and you're running late, you can't get them breakfast yet, and you don't want to pack them a lunch, don't worry, just tell them, get in line for lunch in the cafeteria, and all they'll do is walk in there, pick it up, and go sit down. And they don't have to do anything else. The lunch area and the cafeteria area is going to be socially distanced, 6 feet apart. There will be there's little stickers on the tables, and the kids will sit on those stickers. If you've seen our lunch tables, we have those big, what are they, green tables. There'll be 3 kids per table, where before I think we'd probably get up to almost like 15 kids on one of those tables, and the little kids on there. We'll just have 3 kids at each of those tables. The tables will be sanitized in between every class. They're going to be wiped down with sanitizer. Our custodial staff, our amazing noon duties will be working to do that in between each class as one leaves and before the next one comes. Any questions up to this point? No? Breakfast and lunch, so yep.
We're looking pretty good on questions.
Okay.
There was a bathroom question, but I think I answered it in the chat.
Okay. Those of you who've been taking advantage of the meals, the free meals that they give out on Mondays and Wednesdays, where you can come and pick those up, that will continue. So if you know, or you have friends or family that are part of the virtual program, that's still going to continue, so that on Mondays and Wednesdays, they can come and pick up those lunches for the students. So that's just some kind of interesting thing to remember. All right, so we'll start to talk a little bit about before and after school. Just remember that the masks need to be worn at all times. It's preferable that you drop your students off in the cage when driving, and then you don't have to get it out at all. But I know that that's not always the case. And in fact, for our kindergarten parents in the afternoon, they do have to park and walk to the kindergarten rooms to pick up the kids. If that's the case, please make sure you're wearing a mask during those times. Your students will wear masks all the way until they get into the cars. We're going to show you where you're going to enter and exit. There are some few changes from the past. So if you've been with us, I'll show you some maps in just a second about where students will enter and where you can pick them up. And then please just follow the directions of the adults at all time, and just know that this idea of, we really appreciate your patience and grace, and because we are all in this together. Our staff members are doing their best and to keep your students and your children safe, and so we appreciate you following the directions of those adults. And again, just know that everybody's coming from a good place, that even if they're asking you to do something, again, they're coming from a good place and sort of the health and safety of everybody. So we appreciate that.
Mr. Corporal?
Yep.
We had a couple of questions pop up just about the eating.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned the distance at the tables and the reduced numbers of students at each table. But the question is, does this mean each class will be eating individually?
What it means is each class will be eating together with one other class in their grade level. So if you take first grade as an example, in first grade, we have 2 classes of classic students returning. Then we have Mrs. Mendez and we have Mrs. Tuttle. They'll be eating lunch at the same time, but their classes will be separate at the lunch tables. And then, you look at another grade level, in 4th and 5th grade, Mrs. Nakamoto has a 4-5 combo. Mrs. Porter teaches 5th grade. Those 2 classes will be out at the lunch tables at the same time, but in separate locations at separate tables.
There was also a breakfast question in terms of, let's see. So we know how to do second chance, but let's see. What will the procedure for breakfast be? Do kids need to report to class first?
Good question. So right now, if you guys are familiar with second chance, we actually can't offer second chance at the moment just because of the way we'd have to cover it and with staff members, and then student groups would be mixing. But we are able to cover it safely in the morning time. So breakfast is available from 7:30 in the morning till 8 a.m. As students enter their gate, if they want to go have breakfast, and they can go straight to the cafeteria and get breakfast. All other students, when they come through the gate, will go out to the playground and meet their teachers on the playground in line. But if they want to have breakfast, you can just tell them, go ahead and walk over to the tables and they can get some breakfast. If you have, a kindergartner who's new here, we'll have staff members out at the gates to help them and show them where and direct them and walk them over to the tables for breakfast. And then, so that's just in terms of time too, we'll get to that with the map, but if they're going to eat breakfast, it's better to get them here around 7:40 or so. Any later than that, the kids have a hard time, eating breakfast, finishing, and getting to class on time. Sometimes kids come up at like 7:55 and they want to run and get their breakfast, and there's just not enough time to do that.
Did you cover entry through different gates or?
There's some maps on here. We'll get to that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So health and safety, let's talk about the kinds of things we have in place for health and safety. Number one is that at home, we ask all families each day before you send your children to school is just to do a daily symptom check at home before coming to school. And on the next slide, I'll show you some of those symptoms that we're looking for. And then we'll talk to you about some of the procedures. Well, what happens if they do have one of those symptoms? What happens? What are the procedures in place? This year, students will be sent home much more frequently for symptoms. And it's simply because of the fact that COVID-19 symptoms are the same symptoms as regular common colds, are the same symptoms as the flu. And so there really is no way to know if it is a symptom of COVID-19 or if it's a symptom of something else. So we do have some procedures that have been adopted by the county health department and the CDC that we'll be following. But it does just entail students getting sent home much more frequently. Students will not be punished for attendance this year because of that. If they're sent home with a symptom, their absences will be excused, and teachers will be providing work for them, either through Canvas still or through just some work packets and worksheets and things that are going along with what's happening in the school. But because of that change, we need to make sure that everybody has their emergency contacts updated with the school and the office. And there's 2 ways you can do that. You can log into your parent portal and update them, or you can just call the office and talk to Miss Marlene or Miss Vori, and they can help you out with that also. because what we need is we need to make sure everybody is within 30 minutes. If you get a call that your student has a symptom, you have to be able to pick them up within 30 minutes, because otherwise, we're not equipped to, like, as a health station, to equip numbers of students safely and separately if they're going to be there for hours at a time. Because if, heaven forbid, they do have positive for COVID-19, we don't want them to expose more people when they're here. So it can be you who picks them up, or it can be anybody on your emergency contacts. Now, they have to be on your emergency contacts in parent portal for them to pick them up. So if you want to go ahead and just add some friends right now, I knew that I did that at my own school. I added every one of my best friends that live in the neighborhood, because I'm a little more than a half hour away from their school. So I just added them, and they're going to go pick up my kids if they need to. But we unfortunately can't release anybody. If it's the day of and you're just like, so-and-so is going to come get them, we legally can't do that unless they're already on the emergency contact. So please update that. And then that also may need some sort of backup childcare plan, because if a child is sent home with symptoms, they will be expected to stay home for a period of time. So you'll need to start thinking about that right now. And this slide here kind of explains that a little bit. Is that, so say a student does have a symptom and they were sent home, or remember, as parents, before you send them to school, you're going to be monitoring them for symptoms also. Then the student will need to stay home for 10 days after the first time that those symptoms appeared. And then they must have no fever within 24 hours. So 10 days after they first appeared and no fever. And that has to be no fever without any fever reducing medicines too, Tylenol or ibuprofen, that kind of thing. So that's one way they can come back if they have a symptom, 10 days. Another way is they can actually get a negative COVID test. And I have some resources for that. There's actually a lot of free testing sites up in the county now. In fact, I just went to one in San Marcos the other day to test it out, and it's incredibly easy and fast and free. I was in and out of there in 13 minutes. But if you get a negative COVID test, they can actually come back within 3 days. Okay. There's actually a third way that they can come back. And that's, for instance, like say your student has chronic allergies, where they've diagnosed with allergies, or maybe shortness of breath because they have asthma. Then you can have a doctor's note that explains that, and then turn it into our nurses. And then they can come back before those 10 days also. It's sort of, there's a whole little chart in the parent book. It's called a decision tree that, like, if this happens, then this happens, that walks through all of this. So refer to that parent handbook if you have more questions about it, but that's kind of the overview. So that's one, if they have symptoms. And down at the bottom of this slide, you can see what the symptoms are. And if you look at that, you're like, wow, that's pretty much every symptom, right? Cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, chills, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headaches, new loss of taste or smell, a sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting or diarrhea. So if a student exhibits one of those symptoms, either at home before you send them, because you're checking them, or at school, that's when we will be calling you to come have them pick up. And then when these scenarios kick in, then it's either 10 days off, or a negative COVID test, or a doctor's note about another condition. Now, I know that is kind of shocking at first, right? It's just like, holy mackerel, like my kid's going to be out a lot. And that may be the case. We expect we will have a lot of kids that are going home for that. Our nurses will also be making the decision based on, the information they have on students, doctor's notes and things like that. But just to know that these were developed based on this guidance it's been adopted by all of the school districts in the county. So this isn't unique to Vista. This is actually guidance from the San Diego County Office of Education and from the San Diego County Department of Health. And so we're following their recommendations. And it's all about just keeping everybody safe. It's sort of that idea of an abundance of caution so that we can maybe stop things spreading before they happen. The biggest thing with this too, though, is going to be communication. Please communicate with us or your teacher or the office. If your child does have symptoms at home and you're going to hold them out, please give us a call and let us know. And again, this isn't, we don't want this to be something where parents hide it and like, oh, okay, just go and don't tell your teacher you're not sick, right? Don't tell them you have a headache. Because we want to work with you and we will work with you and our teachers will work with you getting your student work for when they are home. And again, it's in the idea of keeping everybody else safe. So that one I talked to you about was this idea if they exhibit symptoms. There's actually 3 different scenarios. So the first one being, if they exhibit symptoms, give us a call, let your teacher know, let us know. The second one is if your child has been exposed to somebody who tests positive for COVID-19. So maybe a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, a mom, a dad was positive, please give us a call right away so we will know. And I've had actually a couple families already let us know, and we really appreciate you guys reaching out for that. And then the third option is if your child actually does test positive for COVID-19, again, please let us know. We have lots of protocols and procedures in place for each of these situations about notifying classes, notifying the school. Sometimes if something happens in another class, you may never hear about it because of that idea of the bubble that we created, because your student wouldn't have had any contact with that other class. And our teachers and our staff have been amazing too. We've got policies in place now where our teachers don't cross over bubbles. So, unfortunately, they don't get to go into the lounge anymore and eat together. They keep their distance. They don't go into each other's rooms anymore, all for that idea of they're not crossing over bubbles and mixing other classes. Okay. Any questions in these areas here then, just about this health and safety procedure?
Just a lot of symptoms questions, but I think you may have answered most of them. There are a couple things. If you have 2 kids attending school and one child becomes sick, does that mean both children stay home or get sent home?
So if it's scenario 1 here, if only one child has symptoms, then that's the only child who has to stay home. But if they have symptoms because maybe they were exposed to somebody who was positive for COVID-19, then both would have to stay home. But if it's, one has symptoms, the other one does not, and they've had no exposure, then only one has to stay home.
And you did touch on this too. Will parents be notified if a child has been sent home sick and they are in my child's class?
Yes. So you won't be notified if it's a case of just a general symptom like a fever, one symptom. But if it has been exposure to COVID-19 or testing positive for COVID-19, then you will be notified. But not just for the number 1. You won't be notified for every case of number 1 on this slide.
And you did touch on this also. Will children be allowed or expected to do work from home if they are sent home?
Yeah, we will have independent study for work for them, and we would love to. And of course, again, we're asking for patience and grace from you guys. We'll give you guys the same patience and grace, is that just communicate with us and let us know. If they're truly sick and they can't work, just let your teacher know. And then, of course, but if it's one of those where they had a symptom and they have to wait 10 days and they're okay now, but they still have to wait the 10 days, then they can do the work. Yeah.
And one final thing that you alluded to about the emergency contacts, it said there are only 5 emergency contacts. How can we add more?
That is a great question. Is Marlene still here? I saw her earlier.
I thought I did too.
Marlene, do you know if that's a possibility? If anything, we could do a supplemental emergency card in the office. We could just do a paper-based one.
I think
make a note. Yeah.
I think there is a way to add, but I can't think of how to do it right now. I think
if you need to add more than 5, just give us a call tomorrow and we'll work with it. We'll figure out a way to make sure that can happen.
Now, there were a bunch of symptom questions, but I feel like you may have answered them. If I missed any symptom questions or you have something more specific, can you just type it in now and I can hang on to that? So far, so good.
Okay. All right, if one pops up, I can jump back to it when we get to arrival procedures here. So arrival procedures, that's the morning time. So remember, the gates open at 7:30. I know sometimes parents, they're like, oh, I got to go to work. It's going to be fine if I drop them off at 7:20, right? We can't have that this year, especially. It's actually bad in the past because there's nobody watching the kids out there. We have no staff on duty, but starting at 7:30, we have staff on duty to watch the students and start letting them into school. So if they're there before that, they're going to be congregating together outside, and it's going to be very unsafe. So at 7:30, the gates will be open. The easiest thing to do would be just to drive through the gate and let the students out in the cage and let them cross at the crosswalk. We'll have a noon duty out there at the crosswalk to stop traffic. You can park and walk the students to your gate, but at this time, we can't have any parents or any volunteers on campus. The only adults allowed on campus are staff members. And then once the kids come through the gate, they're going to walk, like we talked about before, straight to either the breakfast tables or out to their playground. Here it talks about what grades at what gate, but let me just show you the map here. And this map is also in the parent guide, that parent handbook, so you can take a look at that later. So if you kind of just orient yourself with this map, this is north up here. Here's the train tracks right here. The main parking lot. This is the main front of the school right here. So this is the main cage we've always sort of used. In the morning, you can drive in through the entrance over here, drop the students off here, and then they will walk at the crosswalk, and they'll have one of three options. So our kindergartners will go, and our first graders are going to enter at this gate right here. If you know where Mrs. Tuttle's room is, that's right by Miss Tuttle and Mrs. Kern's room. That's what we're looking at right here. Okay, so that's for our kindergarten first graders. And then they're just going to walk right through here, and then they're going to line up out on the playground. So our second and third graders, again, cross the crosswalk. They'll come at this gate here. This is the library here. This is if you've been here in the past where Mrs. Mendez normally releases her students. I think Mrs. Tuttle used to release her students through here. That's where the second and third graders will go through. Our library is right here too. And again, this is the quad area there. And we'll have little signs up there also. And I think after a day, it's really, kids are going to know exactly where to go. This is the main gate, the big double swinging gates outside of the lunch tables. This is going to be the entrance for our fourth and fifth graders and our TK students. Our TK students are going to actually go in and sit at the tables as a class. And Mrs. Kern is going to meet them there.
Mr. Corporal.
Yep.
If they're going to eat breakfast, are they going to go through their indicated gate or just through the main gate?
Yep, great question. Still go through your indicated gate, even if you're going to eat breakfast. So kindergartners come through this gate and they'll walk down around here. We'll have staff members out there to help them and direct them and to show them where to go. And then they'll still come over to the lunch tables this way. And one of the reasons is that at the entry, we're actually going to be having our staff members take the students' temperatures as they come in. And again, that's an added safety precaution as one of those symptom checks. If anybody has a temperature of over 100.0, then that's considered a high temperature, and that's considered a symptom. Well, they'll have to go home. If you happen to drop them off and you drove away, we'll give you guys a call and we'll have to come back and get them. They also have an opportunity too. Sometimes, if they're running or they walk to school and sometimes they can get a little warm, we'll have a little space for them to have a seat, maybe sit down for 10 minutes and rest, and then we'll retake their temperature. But if the temperature is still high at that point, then they will have to be sent home. And that's, again, this is all the morning as they enter. That'll just happen one time where we'll take their temperature as they enter. Again, we have our SDC students that have been here and they've been doing this procedure in the morning and it works great. The kids are super cooperative with it. And just as I talk about SDC too, we've sort of had this policy, but it's been hard to communicate with parents is out here, there's about 5 parking spots right here where it says SDC parents only. This is outside of AM/PM. Please do not park in those spots because our parents who have SDC parents really need those spots, especially some of those students with special needs have a harder time walking long distances. We just out of respect to them, if you could please not park in those spots there. Leave those
Mr. Corporal?
Yeah. Can
you just review the arrival points for the different grade levels?
Yep. So remember, everybody in the morning can drop off. This is that normal cage in the drive-through lane here. You can drive in through this lane, it says red, and drop them off at the gate. Drop them off at the cage, sorry. And then up here at the top, this is kindergarten and first grade. This is right near Mrs. Tuttle's room, Mrs. Kern's room, if you're familiar with that area. This building up here on the map, this is kindergarten up here. So it's not all the way up there by kindergarten. It's right here. And there's a little walkway you'll see. And then that gate, you'll see a noon duty there in the morning with a vest on also. And then second and third, we'll enter at this gate right here. This is kind of by the library. There's a safety closet right here if you've ever seen the safety patrol kids come out of there. And then TK fourth and fifth will be that main big gate. So normally in the morning, you know, where everybody used to come through this gate here, it's just going to be TK fourth and fifth. And then SDC will have their same gate over there.
And I have a two-part question, kind of. How about walkers? Or how about if there are older siblings helping their younger students?
Great question. So in the mornings, what we would like the older sibling to do is to walk them to the correct gate. So if it's a older sibling walking a first grader, they can walk them to this gate, just leave them there and say goodbye, and then walk to their gate. Walkers, same thing, would just walk in from any direction they normally do. If you do need to park, please use the crosswalk at all times. And I know sometimes it seems kind of weird because if you're parked way over here, you're like, why would I walk back to go use the crosswalk and then come across? It just controls the flow much better than people crossing in all directions.
Also,
yeah,
you want to keep those drop-offs in that main parking lot. There's a question about, can we drop off by the bus area?
Yes, so in the morning, no drop-offs up in this area because we will not have any staff members up here, and we do have the buses out there. And so, if kids are running around, it can be dangerous. So no drop-offs there in the morning. You'll see for the pickup, we do have a pickup spot up here, but that's because we have a staff member that'll be out there helping the kids. So no drop-off in that upper lot, okay? And in the mornings, this line is never long. And if this time, it's going to be half the number of students on campus. So the traffic will be real easy here in the morning. It shouldn't be a problem at all.
There are also a couple of bubble questions. How are we going to make sure as they're dropped off and walking through the gate and along the sidewalk, that they're distancing?
That's a good question. So we'll have to, teachers will be talking to them, and we'll have you talk to them to follow those social distancing stickers. So we're going to have stickers in a line outside of every one of these entrances, so that if they have to stop and wait for the student in front of them to get their temperature checked, they'll stop on one of the dots and wait, and we'll have staff members out there to remind them. We'll have them along the sidewalk areas out here also, so they're, again, staying away from those other bubbles. So yeah, thank you for thinking of that, because that's the exact philosophy.
And piggybacking on that, how are we going to protect them during breakfast time?
So during breakfast, we're going to have, generally during breakfast, we have a lot fewer students eating. So we'll have grade level tables assigned and then class tables assigned. So they'll still be eating with their classes in the morning during breakfast. We'll have little signs out there, and we'll have staff members helping them direct them to the correct spot to sit. But that's, again, one of those where from 7:30 to 8, students sort of trickle in. So it's never very crowded at the breakfast tables. And then it'll be even half the number of students. So it'll be less crowded.
Okay.
That was the temperature check and hand sanitizer I talked to you about. When they come in, they'll get their temperatures checked. They'll get some hand sanitizer as they enter. So dismissal, arrival, there's, here's a bunch of the information here. I think we'll just kind of go to the map, and I'll talk to you from the map about all of this information here. So here, the big difference you'll see between arrival and dismissal is that we have 2 different locations for pickup if you're driving. We've always had this upper lot up here. This is the lot. It now has solar panels in it. You don't see it in this picture, but this is the lot with solar panels. And if you're driving, you can drive in here, and right along the sidewalk here along Hanalei Drive, the 4th and 5th graders will be picked up there. We've always had that pickup spot in the past, but we haven't talked a lot about that it's just for the upper grade students. So now we're going to say it's for the upper grade students. Now, if you have a 4th or 5th grader and a younger sibling, that sibling can pick up the kid and then walk over there. So always going to default to the higher grade. If you have a fourth grader and a third grader, pick them up here. If you have a fifth grader and a first grader, pick them up here. Okay. And then the other one that we do the drop off in the morning, that's going to be for grades 1 through 3. They're going to pick up in that cage right there. Now within those cages, we've got cones that will partition off where each class will wait. So for instance, Mrs. Porter's class will wait in an area just with their class. Oh, and there you can see Miss Smith holding those up right now. Those will designate and tell the kids where to stand so that they will stay in their bubble within the cage. And it'll be spread out through the entire length of the cage. So let's pretend you're driving in here, you come here and you see your kids standing way down here at the end of the cage. Don't stop there and let them enter there, because that actually backs up all of the traffic. Just you can kind of wave at them and say, hey, I'm here. And then go ahead and drive all the way up to the front like you normally do. Your student will walk out and around and then all the way down to the crosswalk and meet you down there. Okay. Now you may have noticed we've got driving for 4th and 5th, and we've got driving for 1st through 3rd. What about kindergarten? Because of our kindergarten students are much younger, and our TK students for that matter too, it's always been our policy that parents park and pick them up. And because this year we sort of have some extra safety measures in place, we're going to let our kinders get out 10 minutes early to make that easier for you. So if you are a kindergarten parent, come on in, park in any of these spots. There's always plenty of parking out there. And we do have that benefit of having parking spots. And come across the crosswalk, walk down there. Mrs. Vale will be dismissing from one room. Mrs. Ireland will be dismissing from another room. And you'll just pick up your kid and then walk on back to the crosswalk and back to the car. Even if your car is way down here on the end, please don't cut across right to those rooms. I know it seems like, come on, Mr. Corporal, you're gonna make us walk all around? Yes, please. And no, I'm not lying. I have seen many people almost get hit right there, like many times. And I know other staff members can see it, like scary, like almost get hit right there. Because cars that are coming in here don't see and don't expect people, first of all, but just because it's a line, they don't always see a person kind of cutting around a car. But so please come down and use the crosswalk there. And then you can see for exit gates, it's similar to the morning, but it's not exactly the same. Mrs. Kern is going to be down here at this gate. Mrs. Tuttle will be down there at that gate because that's right by their classrooms. Mrs. Mendez, and then our 2nd grade classes, Miss Rockwood, Mrs. Gephardt will be coming out of this gate over here by the library. And then a 3rd, 4th, and 5th will be exiting out of the main gate. So that you'll really only need to know that if you plan on walking in to meet them. We would prefer that you didn't, because you can imagine where you'd have a bunch of parents congregated outside of each of these gates. It'll be hard for you to socially distance. For instance, what our 1st grade teachers are going to do is they're going to come out of this gate and they're going to walk all of their kids into the cage, into their little zone, and watch them and wait for them there. So your kids will be watched if they're in 1st grade in that area so that you can still drive and pick them up. Okay. And then also too, if you are in the driving in 4-5, you see this area for where it says buses, along that curve is where the buses stop. So please, if you get there early and the buses aren't there yet, never park on that curve, because then the buses actually, when they come in, they're going to make you pull out and get to the end of the line anyway. We'll put some cones here though, so you'll know where the start of the line is, but it's going to be over here on the side. Just got to leave spaces for the buses. So just like being able to come and pick up your kids in 30 minutes or less, in the afternoon, you have to be on time to pick them up. Sometimes in the past, what will happen is we'll bring kids into the office and then we'll call parents because maybe they forgot or various reasons. We can't do this year because we can't have mixed groups of students come and sit in the office and wait for late parents. So you really need to pick them up on time. And unfortunately, if you are going to be late, and I know things happen. Car breaks down, there's an accident on the freeway and you get stuck behind it. Just give us a call so there's a heads up and we can try to arrange something. But if it's a pattern where you're just late, then we will have to actually move you to the virtual model because we just can't accommodate that if people are late.
Mr. K, can you just call out, since those dismissal times are a little bit different with kinder and
Yeah, thank you.
can you just call those out?
Yeah, so, and Mondays, this is our minimum days, for most students, or for first grade through fifth grade, they go from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And that's actually a little different. If you were with us last year, Mondays we used to get out at 12:51. That's why it looks different. Our new dismissal time is 1 o'clock, okay, for first through fifth grade. But kinder, remember, we'll be dismissing them 10 minutes early, so they'll be getting out at 12:50 on Mondays, where you'll walk over there and pick them up and then go back to your car and then take off. And the nice thing too for our kinder parents is there's actually 2 lanes right there. So even if there's a line of cars waiting to pick up their students, kinder parents, you'll be able to drive right on by. Tuesday through Friday, first through fifth gets out at 2:16. It used to be 2:18. It's 2:16 now. Don't ask me why, I couldn't really tell you. And then kinder, though, will get out 10 minutes earlier than that. It's 2:06 p.m. Okay.
We do
And
have a question.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, when I say kinder, that's kinder and TK. Yeah, kinder and TK. Yeah.
We have a couple of questions in the chat about what if you have 1 kinder and 1 fifth grader, or what to do if I have kinder and a third.
So if you have kinder and so what I would do is get your kindergartner first, and then you can go back into and then you can either just wait at the gate for the other person to come out and then walk back to your car. You can get your kinder and then get back in your car and then get in the line if you want. It's really up to you. But pick up your kindergartner first and then wait for your second one. And then again, as you're waiting out there, please just keep your distance from other people. Don't crowd around any of the gates. And if you have a first grader and a fifth grader, remember that the fifth grader will walk down to the first graders, pick them up, and then walk them over there to the driving zone.
And that also leads into another question. Just someone wanting to confirm that we will have enough room in that pickup cage. Kind of like keeping the kids in their own bubble.
Yeah, and we've gone out there and mapped it out, and we've got it set where there will be a space for each class in there to keep the classes in their bubbles and separate in that cage. We think we do have enough space. Like I said, we've kind of gone out and mapped it out. We still will have buses, so we didn't really talk about that. But if your student is riding the bus, they can continue to do that. In the mornings, they'll actually be taking kids' temperatures before they get onto the bus. But in the afternoon, what happens is the teachers dismiss them and the kids sit at our lunch tables before they get onto the bus. But now they're going to go straight onto the bus and then sit on the bus in this area over here. So we'll have, and again, if you think about it, even though our classrooms are going to have the same number of students, we're going to have half the number of students on campus. So when we had over 500 kids on campus, the cage wasn't ever that crowded. We actually have the majority of the cage closed on regular times where the kids don't even go all the way down to the end. So now we have half the numbers of kids on campus, and we're going to use the entire length of the cage.
So this probably isn't really related to this. Oh. There is a question about what is AM/PM doing?
So so AM/PM, we have new procedures for them in the afternoon also. It's actually going to be out on the playground. So for kindergarten, first and second grade, the teachers are actually going to dismiss the AM/PM kids first to go out to the playground to meet the K1-2 staff members. The 3, 4, 5 staff members are going to dismiss out the other direction to the other playground where staff members will meet them out there. And that'll keep the AM/PM kids out of the main hallways. In the past, we used to just let the AM/PM kids walk down the hallways, and the little kids would walk by the fifth graders and give them a high five. Yeah, see them. So now they're going to go out to the playground to do it. And then with AM/PM, if you have any questions about that, I talked to Miss Anna Fernandez. I know they've been working this week on enrolling people and getting them scheduled for, it's really an AM, PM, and an ACES program. If you have any questions about that, go ahead and give her a call, because like I said, I know she's been working on the registrations, and they've reduced their class sizes down to 14 students to 1 in the afternoon per grade level. So, first grade will have 14 first graders and 1 staff member as an example.
And I think we need just a little bit of clarification on sibling pickup. There's a comment in the chat that said you didn't want parents walking up if possible, but my kinder teacher said that my older student would be able to pick them up and walk them to the cage. So I'm lost on what we're to do. So I think we need a little clarification in that area.
Yeah, so yeah, and it's a little confusing because kinder is getting out a little earlier. So there's a couple options with kinder. You can walk, pick them up, and then bring them back to your car. If you have a sibling and you'd rather not do that, the kinder teachers know that the sibling can walk down there, but the sibling's not going to get out for 10 minutes after the kindergartner, but the kindergarten teachers will hold the kindergartners in the classrooms. They'll wait for the sibling to pick them up, and then the sibling could walk them to the cage. So you do have both of those options, and it's up to you. You could walk and get your kindergartner, or the sibling could go get the kindergartner. The kindergartner would just wait a little bit there. And either of those will work fine. And that's why we're trying to, just leave the walking to the, getting out and walking to the kinder parents so that they can go get their younger ones. Any other questions? I feel like I've been talking a long time. I'm sorry, guys. It's not the best way to share information or do things, but it's just a lot of information we got to get through. And remember too, there is that parent handbook. If you go back to the search your email for parent news or parent connection in there, when it talks about this meeting, there's a link to the parent handbook. It's got these maps in it. So if you want to go back and look at those, if you're curious about that. And then it talks about all of the, the symptoms. It's got the symptoms listed in there, the procedures if students do have symptoms, how long they need to stay home. All of that information is in there as a review.
There was a question about the AM PM phone number, which I put in the chat in case you were wondering about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So here I just kind of went back to the beginning just so you can kind of think back. Maybe that'll jog your memory if you're clear on everything. We talked about the student agreements, the face masks, the social distancing, hand washing. We talked about the health and safety, those home checks where you're checking for symptoms at home. We'll check for symptoms as they enter school. What happens if there are symptoms, those 10-day periods or positive tests. And then we talked about our arrival and dismissal procedures.
The chat looks good. I think we've cleaned it up. If anyone has an additional question, there is something saying, so kids are not required to bring backpacks. If they do, will they be sanitized? That was one late question that came in.
The backpacks will not be sanitized. They will be kept separate from the other students. Students won't be sharing them or touching other backpacks. I would just defer to their teachers actually about if they won't need one, because some teachers will want them to have one. So before you decide to say, no, they're not going to bring one, just check with their teachers first, just to be sure.
So again, the chat looks pretty good. I feel like we have a lot of questions that have been answered and a lot of information to absorb. If anyone has another question, feel free to type it in now. And also,
as if you want to go back and look at that little handbook with all this information in it, if you think of something tomorrow, please call our, the office staff has been, well-versed in all of this. They've helped with these plans, so they know. You can send me an email anytime you want. Also, I'll reply back to you guys. But please just let us know any, concerns or questions that you have, because, like we said up here, definitely our goal is we've been working hard to make sure that, all of our students can come back to to a safe environment, and as safe as we can make it be, because we want them back here. I know a lot of you want them to be back here, but we want to also, we need to balance this idea that we are still in a pandemic, and there are still lots of cases of COVID going on out there in the community, but we're going to do our best to keep the kids safe.
So that leads into a question that just came up.
Mm-hmm.
Can we switch back to virtual if we decide in person isn't what we want?
The short answer is yes. Kind of the more long answer is we need to make those changes before next Tuesday, and we have to make those changes based on space available. So if the classrooms are open, or if the virtual classes have space in them, then we can move your child over to it. Most of the classes have space. Some of our second grade and third grade classes do not, though, and are pretty full. But if you're interested in changing your learning model, you can call the office tomorrow or send an email. And then what we do is we have a waiting list. Kind of we do it based on when we hear from people. And then I go through and check the spaces in classes. And if there are spaces, we'll go ahead and move them. And if there isn't space, I'll just leave you on the list so that if space opens later. But we have to have those decisions by Tuesday, because once Tuesday comes and we return, and we can't have students moving back and forth. At that point, we need to have some stable cohorts and some stable classrooms at that point.
There is one more question. You kind of covered it on in-class safety, but will they have plastic partitions on the desks? So maybe revisit the...
Yeah, we don't have plastic partitions on the desk, but we do have, I think it was a little bit in here. We have cardboard partitions. So every desk does not have its own little plexiglass zone on it. Instead, we have those desks spread as far apart, like they're at least a minimum of about 4 feet. Some of the rooms, they are 6 feet apart, but most of them are closer to 4. And they have cardboard partitions for work time, independent work time. So the students will move those down when the teachers are talking and they need to hear from the teacher, and they'll put them back up when they're working. And teachers still will be, I think we touched on this a little bit, teachers will still be, rotating on and around the room to check on students, but they're going to be trying to minimize their close contact with students. They'll still be passing out papers. They'll still be collecting papers. They're just going to do things like collect papers in a bin. They're going to wash their hands a lot after they collect things, after they pass things out.
There is a question about the recording and slides be available and accessed online, be able to...
Yes, I will. I have been recording this the whole time. So when this is over, I was going to save the recording and I will post a link. I'll probably send the link out by email to everybody. And I'll include it in the parent connection that goes out this weekend also.
And that looks like it's about it in the chat.
Great. Well, again, thank you guys so much. Don't forget, just read through that parent guidebook. Reach out to us. We are here to support you guys. We love your kids. We want to see them. We want to keep them safe, and we want to help you out. So please, let us know. Our office is open for you guys. If you want to come by and see them in person, you can do that too. Just remember to, watch the social distancing stickers that are out there when you come by. All right. Have a great night, guys. And thanks for being here.